mute myself. Okay. If you turn to new in the glossary, which is bottom of page 472 in the glossary, left-hand column, you'll see two entries. And by two entries, I mean new serves as the lemma, which is the main entry, or it's the main word for a dictionary entry, essentially. It serves as that twice, right? The first one, it says new, adverb, and then it gives the various meanings. Now, just now, presently, right? And you have a whole bunch of selection and line numbers, okay? So if you just look at that one, it's in selection 1, line 25, line 45, selection 4, line 17, line 19, selection 5, line 12. Keep going. Oh, look, selection 9B, line 31. Well, that's exactly what on page 80 in Marsden, in the second, nope, sorry, grab the first edition, not page 80, 9B, line 31, new, right? So that's telling you that's my word for this particular entry, for this particular item that I'm glossing. Down beneath that, you have another entry for new, where it's the conjunction, meaning now that, in as much as, since, and it is used in that sense also in the reading on Caedmon, but not until you get down to line 90, okay? So that's an indication of where, to me, going through this and I see new, conjunction, somebody turned to that page, found new, didn't look at both entries, just looked new, conjunction, went back, put down conjunction. Always look for the Marsden selection number and then the line number for the particular instance that you're looking for. Now, there will be an awful lot where you won't get the selection in line number, like pronouns, because he doesn't gloss every instance of a pronoun, or a demonstrative article, okay, or a conjunction. Pretty much, you know, once you kind of find the pattern, then it fits. And also look at context, right? It's pretty clear. It's hard to make this new into a conjunction. Now that we shall praise, now that we should, now that we ought to, that's awkward, even, you know, even for poetry, okay? So, next word, Shulon. Well, if you turn to the, and I don't have the page, the things written down. If you turn to Shulon in the back, and you find it's a preterite present form of verb. That is, it doesn't fit the weak verb, the strong verb style. Okay, it's preterite present form of verb, and it's got that spelling S-C-U-L-O-N. Little bit of advice when you, as most of you are doing, I think, when you copy out the lines, make sure you spell the word correctly. I noticed one person's, and I don't remember who off the top of my head, for the next word, Harian, the person had handwritten it H-A-R-I-G-E-A-N. Well, if you look back in the glossary, you won't find an entry for H-A-R-I-G-E-A-N. Okay, so make sure you spell it correctly. So Shulon, well, you turn to that entry, and you see, where is my printed plural? Towards the end of the entry, it's like the third to the last that is bolded. You see Shulon, S-C-U-L-O-N. Preterite first plural, and it gives an entry, and then a couple entries. Preterite third plural, 9b, 31. That's this passage, okay? Perion. It's a weak verb, type 1. It's the infinitive. And I think I put this in the email. If it is infinitive, what does that mean? It's not conjugated in any way. So conjugated means it's joined with. You conjugate a verb when you join it with a person and a number. So when you join it with first, second, third person, singular or plural, okay? Then you join it, and that changes the form of the verb. If it's infinitive, it is in its base, unconjugated form. So all you put down is infinitive. In infinitives, you almost always, I would say 90% of the time, I mean, just rough off the top of my head, you translate that to whatever the verb is. So if it's run on, to run. If it's a drink on, to drink. Carry on, to praise, right? So then you got to make everything else kind of work with it. And I know Marsden in his gloss, he doesn't do it like I do it here, okay? I'm not saying I'm right, he's wrong, I'm just, okay? Heaven reaches. It's a noun. It's got the ES ending, which tells you almost automatically what. Somebody. Turn your mics on. Every one of you is muted. It's genitive, okay? It'd be a whole lot easier, wouldn't it, if it had an apostrophe, but it doesn't, because the modern apostrophe, as I mentioned before, that's an etymological error, essentially, from 16th century, right? So it's genitive. It's singular and it's neuter. At the beginning of every noun entry in Marsden's glossary, he tells you the gender of the word, whether it's masculine, feminine, or neuter, okay? The next word, wired. It's a noun. It's nominative. It's singular. It's masculine, okay? So now translate that line. Now, what? Shulon. The O-N ending is telling us it's plural. So the three, it's third person, right? So what are we being told there? Now, it's not they, but though it's we. Now must we, now shall we, now should we, now I put, ought underneath. And the only reason I put ought underneath is because that next word really should be translated with an infinitive, right? And if you say, now must we to praise, or now we must to praise, well, that's ungrammatical. Now, ought we to praise, that's grammatically correct, okay? So now we ought to praise, or we ought to praise, heaven, kingdoms, wired. And I gave, for my first translation for that, the modern English derivative. That is the word that comes from that in modern English. Warden. Like a fish and game warden. The fish and game warden does what? Protect fish and game, right? A prison warden essentially is supposed to do what? Is supposed to protect the prisoners, right? But that word warden, really in most contexts, what happens to it in modern English? It gets replaced by what? The word that is almost always used, and I didn't use it for my second word, guardian. Guardian comes in through French during the Middle English period, okay? Anytime you have that GU at the beginning of a word in modern English, it comes through French. So, en nom de guerre, Nomdeguerre. What's that mean? The name of war. Well, war is the other word for guerre, right? Line 2. Methodas machta andes modiathunk. Notice how easy it is to see, by the way, the alliteration in that one, right? So methodas, you got that es ending, so you're almost always assuming it's genitive, and when you look it up, it's genitive, it's singular, it's masculine, right? Machta. Now, that's an interesting word because when you look it up, hold on, let me pull out the modern, the second edition, so I can give you the right page numbers. So if you look up MEAHTE, MEAHT, in the second edition, Marsden, that's on page 519 in the glossary, right? Right-hand column, about 2/3 of the way down. You see MEHT, comma, MEHT hyphen, that is, there might be an ending, and it says C, magan, right? Then it also has MEHTE, derived from, that's what that arrow means, or that cursor means, nicht. Well, MEHT hyphen can mean it has an E on the end. So you naturally, you say, oh, MEHT, close enough, right? So you go and you look for magen, and you look up magen, and what do you find? You find it means, it's a present verb, and it means be able, can, be competent, have power to, avail. The measurers be able to, the measurers can, the measurers be competent, the measurers have, well, that doesn't make any sense. So then you go back and you find, oh, nicht. So now you have to go forward, and you see on page 521, right-hand column, just past the middle, nicht. Might, power, strength, virtue, ability, authority, function. And then you start looking down through the entries, and you say, and you see, Machta, M-E-H-T-E. Oh, look at there. Accusative, singular, 9b, line 32. 9b, line 32, that's Caedmon's hymn. Okay? So the measurers, might, power, strength, virtue, etc. Okay? On, we don't worry about glossing conjunctions. His, personal pronoun, genitive, singular. Modiathunk. And it's going to be interesting when we get to actual poem to hear your translations, unless you simply copied Marsden, and that's fine, but then I might put you on the spot and say, okay, give me something else for Modiathunk. He has purpose of mind. Another, where is it? Another edition I have has something like, this one has his mind's wisdom. Another one has something like, I don't remember, intention of mind, things like that. That's one of those compound words that the Anglo-Saxons just love to make that is kind of hard to really grasp in modern English, okay? So the next line, werk, Wooldorfader, Swahe Wundra Ihwats, right? What? 3 alliterative sounds there, right? Werk, it's a noun, it's accusative, singular, several days of little sleep. Neuter, the next word, Wooldorfader, okay? It's a glory father, it's a noun, it's genitive, singular, masculine, it's the work of the glory father, or if you rephrase those, glory father apostrophe S, work, right? And it can be more than work. It could be product, result, thing made, right? Swa, just as, he, wundra, you got that RA ending, which indicates most of the time it's genitive plural, okay? Of wonders, yahwas. Of each, but in this context, it's really every or all, genitive singular, nominative, neuter again. So the work of the glory Father, just as he of every wonder, because when you put the every in front of wonder, that implies that every is now, that wonder is now plural, but you don't have to say of every wonders, because that doesn't make sense, right? Last line, H-adrichten or unstelde. H, it's an adjective, means eternal, nominative, singular, masculine. Notice it agrees with the noun, it is modifying. Drichten, nominative, singular, masculine. Or, I bet you saw that initially and thought, oh, it's or. But it's not or. It means the beginning, the point of the spear like idea. Because you're going to see or sometimes referred to with spears because it's the beginning of the spear. It's the first part that penetrates, somebody. Unstelde, weak verb, type 1, it's preterite. How do you know it's preterite? It's got that D, that D, that dental suffix in it, okay? So, translation, rough translation, very rough translation. Let's see if I can move this down so I can read it. Now we ought to praise the guardian of the heavenly kingdom, God's might, his purpose of mind, the work of the glory Father, just as he of every wonder, okay, move thing. Just as he of every wonder, the eternal Lord, the beginning established. Okay, let me close that. So, does walking through that help a little bit? Okay. We're not going to do, you're not going to do, parsings the entire semester. This is solely designed to really help you to focus on learning those endings, learning the cases, and learning really how to use the glossary, how to maximize your time and make your time spent translating much more efficient. Okay. Having said that, read your articles. I think I read almost all of the articles. They're all really good. I don't think I sent any kind of comments. One comment, and this is something I've noticed the last couple of weeks. Even though I'm not sending articles back marked up, okay? But if I were, be careful about grammatical errors. Be careful about missing words, like, articles in front of nouns when an article is needed. I've noticed a few that, would say, so-and-so needs king to, where king needs the or a in front of it, kind of a thing. And I'm sure it's just because you've got the article in front of you and you're just typing this thing up and hitting send, right? Proofread it, polish it, assume you're sending it off for a mark of some kind. Similarly, I've noticed this on a couple, when it's part of an anthology, or it's an article in a collection, article in a journal, etc., include the page numbers. I've noticed several where it's a collection, like there's one in a collection edited by Paul Sharmak. And it did not have the inclusive page numbers. Always include the inclusive page numbers, okay? In whatever the source, ultimate source material is. Any questions about any of that? Okay. Caedmon. Let's see here. I better grab the wrong book. I've got one book where I've got it, my handwritten translation. I've got another one of the Marsden second editions where I had partial, every now and then the word written in. Yep, and I grabbed the wrong one. That's okay, I can use this other one I have. Any difficulties in translating this material with Caedmon? Let me rephrase that. Well, any difficulties, any surprises, anything that struck your interest, anything where you kind of went, oh, that's cool? Dead silence.
The glossary, I guess, more, and how much will be the specific line that they use, and I think that would have helped, because I know there are times where song and poet is used, or song and singing are right next to each other. Like, what if you just use the first translation, it would say the song,
right,
or something like that. And I think if I would have connected the dots on that manner, I would have had a clear translation.
Okay. Did context help? When you came up to a situation like that, so you could, see, it's not where the poem sang, though poems can sing. I mean, we are going to see, there's at least one example in our readings for this semester of prosopopoeia, where you have an inanimate object that speaks, okay? Sometimes a poem is inscribed on a piece of wood. There is a poem called The Husband's Message, and in that poem, part of it is apparently inscribed on a piece of wood, and the wood speaks. Well, we're going to translate in a few weeks, whenever it is, The Dream of the Rood, and in The Dream of the Rood, the cross of Christ speaks. I mean, literally speaks, etc. Okay? What else?
I still struggle, trying to find the teeny tiny words. It's always been my problem in translating. So I'm still, trying to look in the back of where is this word? And it just puts me behind, and I get really irritated.
Okay. Give me an example. What do you mean by teeny tiny words?
Like was, or it, or stuff like that.
Okay.
Just the little connecting words, that's always been my problem.
Okay.
Even 4 years ago, I was like, I can't find this.
Okay. And it could also be that, it, usually spelled H-I-T or H-Y-T, that he's not going to give a lot of entries for that, because it generally is it, or G-I-T, yet, which means yet, right? He doesn't give every instance of that, because he's assuming once you've seen that a half dozen times or so, okay, where it gets more difficult, I think at least, is with the pronouns. Because, if you turn for a moment, see if I can find one real quick. There's it. Bottom of page 504. Okay, where left-hand column. He, HI, personal pronoun, they, them, their. Okay, notice that, by the way. The Old English, HI, is the third person plural form of the pronoun. The modern third person plural form of the pronoun is they, them, their. So where did they, them, their come from? Because it's not Old English. If it were Old English, there would be a form of that, but it's not. It's Norse. All third person plural forms of personal pronouns, they, them, their, are entirely adopted from Old Norse, from the Viking, beginning with the Viking invasions, and then once the Vikings settled in, those three words totally replaced. That's an example of not just lexical, but grammatical change in the language, okay? That, again, I mentioned a week or two ago, French never did. French never changed the grammar or the grammatical structure at all of the language. It added a hell of a lot of words to the vocabulary, over 10,000 words during the Middle English period, fully 75% of which we still use, right? And those 10,000 words, they replaced an awful lot of Anglo-Saxon words, which is why we don't have Anglo-Saxon words anymore, okay? But he, and then, so that's the main entry, HI. Then look at all the different forms HI takes. It takes HEO, H-E-O, H-E-O-M, H-E-O-R-A, H-I, H-I-E, H-I-E-R-A, H-I-G, H-I-M, H-I-O-R-A, H-I-R-A, H-Y, H-Y-M, H-Y-R-A. That's got to be at least close to a dozen different forms, okay, for they, them, their. And wait till 2 weeks. I think it's 2 weeks. Kenilworth and Kenilhart. That word, you're going to need a lot of alcohol. Let me just put it that way, in order to work through that passage, because you're going to see that it's like every fifth word. And you're not going to know who's the they that's being referred to. Is it Kenilworth and his forces, or is it Kenilhart and his forces? And it's not going to necessarily be clear, okay? Hit, H-I-T, on the next page, 505, left-hand column. Personal pronoun, it or its. Well, it's also, H-I-S can also be it, okay? You know, turn over again. Page 501, personal pronoun, top left-hand column, he, where it means he, him, his. Then you have H-A-E, H-I-E-N-E, H-I-N, H-I-N-H, H-I-N-E, H-I-S, H-Y-M, H-Y-N-E, H-Y-S. Now notice those, by the way, the ones that begin with H and have an N in them. Just look at those briefly. Accusative, 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 accusative. So you have an H, a vowel, or more than one vowel, an N, and then maybe something after it. If it's H, something, something, N, maybe something after it, it's accusative. Modern English accusative, him. Don't think modern English, think King James, think Shakespeare, thine. Okay, that N-E kind of a thing. Look at the dative singular ones. H-I-M, H-Y-M, so there's that M. So if it's got H something M, whether there's another ending on it or not, if it's a personal pronoun, it's dative singular, okay? Look at the ones with an S. H-Y-S, and where was it? Somewhere up there, there's an H-I-S, it seems. Okay, that's genitive. So those are little things, you know. You can either create for yourself a little cheat sheet, or you can just, okay, if it's H, a vowel, and it's got an N, and it's a pronoun, it's accusative. It's receiving that action of the verb. If it's got an H, a vowel, and an M, it's dative. It's the indirect object. Okay? Other questions, comments, concerns? Something that struck you about this passage? How many of you knew this story before? I know Sarah did. Anybody else? Okay. Don't remember how much background Marsden gives. One of you did an article on, reviewed an article by Bruce Holstein, not Holstein, Holsinger? Okay. Which is a pretty good article. Another one did an article by, it's one mentioned by Marsden, in fact. Orton, Caedmon's Christian Poetry. Who did that one? Okay. Interesting thing about Caedmon, if Caedmon was real, right? You know, the time frame that he lived and the account of how he received his literary gifts, let's say. You know, one of the reasons many scholars say, you know, this is complete mythology, this is complete, what's the term Marsden uses, the bottom of page, it's not page 76 in your edition, on page, page 112. However fabulous Bede's account may be. What does Marsden mean by the use of that word, fabulous? What's it related to?
Like a fable?
Yeah, like a fable. Is a fable real? No, fables aren't true. Fables are, you know, fairy stories, essentially. He means fabulous in that sense. He doesn't mean fabulous like, man, this is amazing. This is just the greatest thing you've ever, you know, read. He doesn't mean that kind of fabulous. Okay. One of the reasons, go ahead. Somebody started to say something. One of the reasons many scholars assume that it's fabulous, that it's not real, is because in the history of literature, let's say, I was going to say the history of ideas, but a little bit different. You have other literary characters who receive divine inspiration for creating literary works. In fact, there's another one whose name begins the same way as this character's, Cadmus, in ancient Greece. Okay. Now, Bede's ecclesiastical history is all about the history of the church in Anglo-Saxon-speaking England, from its beginning up into Bede's time. It's written / published, as published as we can use that word, which is an anachronism, in 731. Okay? Bede dies 735. Bede tells us in the previous chapter to this one, chapter 23, he gives us the account of Abbess Hild. Okay? She's the one who is alive when Caedmon receives his gift, right? The implication is that Caedmon receives his gift very soon to Hild's death. Okay? Hild dies in 680. It's either 680 or 681. Caedmon, I read one thing today, I don't remember where. I don't think it was in Marsden. Maybe it was. No, I don't think it is. Yeah, it does. He says in his introductory paragraph in the introduction that this happened perhaps, that is, he has his divine inspiration, perhaps sometime around 670. You'll see a lot of texts that will suggest it's right around 680. It's right around the same time that Hild dies. Okay, so why is that significant? And why does Bede spend an entire chapter, which you've read, translated, hold on, I think just about all of, yeah, you simply translated the entire chapter of this of book 4, okay, chapter 24. So why does Bede include this entire chapter about Caedmon? What's so important about it? Anybody?
I guess because I know it says later in the tale that there were people who learned from him and wrote him tales.
Okay.
So I guess that.
Yeah,
that he's adding to the.
He was illiterate. So, what does illiterate literally mean? Literos refers to letters. He couldn't write. He couldn't read. Right? So when he receives this gift, it's entirely oral. So he composes in his mind, as we're told in the story. He composes in his mind, and he tells people who can write what it is he composes. Right? He delivers, he orally recites, or orally delivers. They copy it down, etc. Okay. So that's one significant aspect. Marsden talks about, I think it's Marsden. Might be confusing this with one of your articles because I've been reading a lot about it. What else? He's the first one who does what? Apparently. He uses this native Germanic poetic form for non-native Germanic poetic reasons. He's the first, if you take Greek and Latin out of the picture, because Greek was a lingua franca of the Eastern Roman Empire, essentially, or the Eastern Empire, and Latin was the lingua franca of the Western Empire, etc. And everybody who was educated knew Latin. They could, if they were educated, they could read and write Latin, etc. And you had, Christian hymns and poems written in essentially those languages, but they weren't necessarily the common, everyday, ordinary speech that people would use in talking with each other. Right? Caedmon, from what we can tell, is really the first user of a vernacular language to put that vernacular language and its poetic system to the use of Christian proselytization, to spread the Christian story. I shouldn't have said proselytization, because proselytization is to make Christians of other people. And it's not clear that that's what Caedmon is necessarily doing. He is spreading the Christian story, but he's not then, doing a kind of a Southern Baptist-y altar call kind of a thing, okay? And we're going to see in a few moments when we get to the actual hymn, I'm going to put something else up that, I don't know if I posted it to you or not. I don't think I did. That I'll also send to you. The Germanic poetic form that he uses, if I had been at the monastery that Caedmon was at, and I saw the harp coming to me, I would have gotten up and left too. Because this is not blank verse. This is not E.E. Cummings. This is not 21st or 20th century verse. This is like, take a villanelle, if you're familiar with a villanelle. Take a villanelle and put it on steroids. I mean, it makes writing poetry orally creating poetry pretty difficult, okay? So let's start with the beginning. I've got 3 different books I'm trying to hold in front of me. Okay, in a very small space. So let me read some, and then whoever's going to start, and I'm going to pretend I don't know that you guys divided up the lines. Whoever's going to start, I'm going to have you read some in Old English also. Right? So, just to put everybody on the spot, we are going to work on some pronunciation. We may not get through all of the passage tonight. We will at least get to and through Caedmon's hymn, because then we're also going to talk about some principles of versification. We'll do some speed translating towards the end. Okay? So let me make sure I'm reading from the same one you guys have. Page. In Theos Ab Bud, notice I'm pronouncing both B's, because again, there are no silent letters. So when you have doubled consonants, you pronounce them both, and you break for syllabification between the consonants. So in Theos Ab Bud Disan, double S's, Minstra Wasum brother, Sindri Liche, Now, I don't know why he doesn't have a dot over that G, because it comes at the end of the syllable, and if it's at the end of the syllable and if it's after an I, it should be the palatalized Y form. So it's not Sindrig, it's Sindri. Sindri Liche, mid god kundre, Yeva Yamarid, on Yawarda. Forthon he Yawunada, Yeriz, not Reese, because it's between 2 vowels, Yorizenliche, lost my place, Leoth, Wirkan. Right? Thothe to Avet, between 2 vowels, Avest Nisse, Onto Arfast Nisse, Belumpen, Swathata, Swahwat, Swahe of God Kundum, Stavum, between 2 vowels, so it's the V sound, Stavum Thur. When you have that H at the end of a word, you give it that sound, almost like you're slightly clearing your throat, right? Thur Bokaras Yelernoda, thought, hey, after Med Miklum, Fet, that's probably Fetche in Shop Yererda, Mid-Tamastan, Sweatnissa on Inberdnissa, Glengdida. That's one where the G is the G. And it's really hard to say those 3 consonants together. N, G, D. Most often you will probably, if you come across a word like that, you're going to find yourself throwing in what's called a Savara Bhakti vowel. where you have a vowel between consonants, like when some people say athlete, or George Bush, nuclear, because you got the C and the L, and it's, you know, so, what was it? Je glangde, right? And in English, je rerde wel je work fourth brochte, right? So all that's one sentence. It's almost like he's, you know, prefiguring William Faulkner. So who's going first? Okay. Just start by reading, let's say, the first line in Old English.
En theosa apudisen ministra was Syndrolice mit Gokundra.
Good. Do the next line.
Yipra Yemerit on Ye Worthad.
Worthad, good.
Football.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Unada. Yeah, there's something funny about this word. Yeah.
Yerees. The S is pronounced like a Z because it's between two vowels. I mean, when your turn comes up, break each word down into smaller units. Yeah, I mean, we're not concerned with flow and all that kind of stuff. Yerees and liche. Good. How do you pronounce that last word?
Layout.
How many syllables is that?
I don't even two. It should be a diphthong.
It's a diphthong, so it's leoth. Good. Okay, so translate however much you are supposed to translate.
Okay, do you want the word for word or like the massage?
Do the word for word first, because that way I can follow along and either stop to ask questions or stop to point something out. Okay. Well, I got a full mind that I have. Okay, if I can read it.
Okay, so word for word. In this Abyssus monastery was a certain brother, specially with divine gifts, glorified and honored, because he accustomed to fitting songs composed, those which to piety and to virtuous behavior pertain, so that whatsoever he from divine writings for scholars learned.
Okay, stop there. I want to go back for a second to the Leoth Wirkon. How did you translate Wirkon?
I had composed.
Yeah, and that's what he has. What form of the verb is that?
Should it be past?
No, it's infinitive.
To compose.
To compose. Okay, so I'm, going back. Yeah. So if you were to turn that around into kind of the massaged modern English, as we said, how would you do that clause that beginning forth on to Wirkon?
I had because he was fittingly accustomed to compose songs.
Okay. And that's exactly what I was looking for. So that was good. You had the infinitive, but notice what you had to do. You had to rearrange the syntax because it doesn't follow modern English syntax. Okay, pick up with where you left off after learned, Bokris learned it, and then go on.
That he, after a short time, in poetical language, with the most sweetness and inspiration adorned, and an English speech well composed, produced.
Okay, stop there for a minute. So you have Shope Urerda in English Urerda. So what obviously does Urerda mean? Because you use the same word for that part of the compound in both instances. Language or speech. We're going to hear in The Dream of the Rood, humans are going to be referred to as, what is it? Rared Berendra, or Rared Barons. That is speech bearers. Okay, so here it's, but Shope language, poetic speech. What does the word Shope mean? It can mean poet. It can mean make. It can mean the thing made, the poem. Okay, it's one of those interesting words, like the word that gets translated into English as poem, because we think of a poem as really solely being what? What's a poem made of, for example? What are the raw materials for poems? Words. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's not a trick question or anything like that. Words, okay? But poesis in Greek doesn't mean to make with words. It simply means to make. Shope means to literally, it means to shape. It's where we get our modern English word shape from. So a shope, a poet, is a shaper. Shaper of words, shaper of ideas into words. If you take Beowulf next semester, you're going to find this beautiful passage where we get the poet talking about a poet turning an experience into words in his mind. How he links word to word, just as we're going to see Caedmon does with Caedmon's hymn. He takes one word, links it to another. How does he link it? Through the practice of alliteration. That whole stress thing that we'll talk about, right? So you have in poetic speech, poetic language, and then English speech, English language. Notice that obviously they're not the same, okay? So he does all that. He composed and produced it. Okay, are you continuing?
I think I was supposed to do 1 through 15.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. And on account of his songs, many men's hearts often to world content and to association with the heavenly life inspired word.
Okay, that word for inspired. Look at it for a second. On Bernda. What is it? Can you tell by looking at it what it really means? Inspired comes from what language? Anybody know? It's Latin. In, spira, means to breathe. So it's this breathing in. George, go away. Cat's banging on my door. Bernda, okay, is burn. Or brennen, and then the metathesis happens. So what happens? How did you translate on Bernda? You said inspired.
Inspired.
Okay, so what's another word for inside but burning? If somebody, produces a desire in you, what's another word that we use for, you know, producing a fire, starting a fire. They kindle.
Kindle.
And that's kind of, right? And I don't think there's any accident that Amazon named its little reading thing a Kindle, because it didn't, you know, it engenders, it inspires, it creates this desire for more reading and such. Okay, go ahead, go on. That's all good.
And also likewise, many others after him in English language began pious songs, or would begin to compose pious songs.
Okay, stop there for a second. Is it English language? ENGL Theoda? Does anybody else have anything different? Is that what, I should ask before I say that. Is that what, yes it is, isn't it? It could be people. Theod is also people, okay? Okay, go ahead. So, you began to compose.
Okay, but no one, however, him it like do could, because he not by man, neither through man taught was, that he the art of the song learned, that he was divinely helped, and through God's gift, the art of singing received.
Okay, so again, notice something I think I mentioned last week, the double negatives. I mean, he's really, by using the double negative, he's really emphasizing he didn't learn this from, you know, taking creative writing classes. He didn't learn this from, it all came from divine inspiration. And you know, notice that word for the gift of, not the gift of poetry, the skill of poetry. Leofcraft, the craft of song. I mean, talk to any writer. Well, talk to almost any writer. There are a few who, you know, now dead, that I absolutely hate because they wrote an awful lot, you know, first draft kind of thing. C.S. Lewis was one of those people. John Milton was one of those people. Samuel Johnson was one of those people. You know, Milton dictated Paradise Lost to his daughters because he was blind by that time. So he's composing it all in his mind. If you've read Paradise Lost, this, you know, should blow your mind, okay? Johnson dictated Rasselas. It was copied off, you know, sent off to pay for his mother's funeral and stuff. So he's talking about the craft, the work of poetry, etc. All right? Go on.
And he therefore never nothing frivolous nor idle song to compose could, but even those which to piety pertained, and that pious tongue befitted to sing.
Okay. So what does that mean? Okay, now it's not quite 15, but now give us your massaged translation. Put that in good English.
Okay. So in this monastery was a certain brother specially glorified and honored with the divine gift, because he was fittingly accustomed to compose songs, those which pertain to piety and virtuous behavior, so that whatsoever he learned from divine writings and scholars, that he after a short time produced a poetical language adorned with the sweetness and inspiration, and well composed in English language. And on account of his songs, the hearts of many men were often inspired to contempt for the world and to association with the heavenly life. And likewise, many others after him began to compose pious songs in the English language. But no one, however, could do it like him, because he had learned the art of song not by men, neither by man, but he was divinely helped, and through God's gift received the art of singing. And he therefore never could compose frivolous or idle songs, but only those which pertain to piety, and that befitted his pious tongue to sing.
Okay, stop there. So notice Leofcraft and then songcraft. Right? In songcraft, you translated the art of singing, but the song there doesn't refer to singing. It's still referring to the same thing. It's still referring to poetry. A poem is a song. Right? Okay, who picks up with, or do you still have 2 more lines?
I need to finish that line 15.
Okay, go ahead. Was Saman, etc.
Yes, so was he the man in secular life settled until the time which he was of advanced age?
Okay. Is that a question?
No, I just stopped in the middle of that line. I didn't know if I was supposed to continue or not.
Okay. But it's not, was he the man? It's, notice again, the syntax is a little odd. He was the man who, etc., etc. Okay. So he picks up old age. So who picks up with 16? Anavranani Lea the Alaranada. Okay. So go ahead and read a few lines in Old English. Or do you want me to first?
Oh, I can
Okay.
try.
Go ahead.
It's been a while. I'm sorry in advance. Let's see. So should I start with Ilda?
Sure.
Ildre, Ilda, und nachher lay off. Hold on, sorry. Leon Day, I think, something like that. That was horrible. On he forthon often worship.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Såna städernas intiga med det hela skölden för indernästa i herpansingan. Såna jag sa the harpan hem nälkan. Såna aras he för sjunga från fem singlet on han öda to his hus.
Okay, that's good. That's enough. And that was pretty good for having been a few years, you said. Okay, so go ahead and start translating, beginning with old age.
Okay. But he was of advanced age, and he, oh my gosh, my handwriting. He learned and he learned the art of the song, something like that. And he often at a feast, when it had been decided that for the sake of merriment they should all be in turn with the harp singing, or recited. I couldn't decide which two.
Right.
When he saw the harp approach him, he arose for shame and soon left the feast, and he went to his house.
Okay. Let me see. Hold on. Yeah, hold on. Back line 16, last word. Yabershippa.
Yeah,
what is that? Again, how'd you translate that? Feast?
I think I had feast, yeah.
Okay. What is it literally? Yeah, can you put them down the street or something? My wife's holding our extremely overweight cat because he likes to bother me by literally, we've got a sliding like a pocket door, and he bangs on it to get my attention at 3 a.m. So we have a love-hate relationship. So she's putting him out. So what is that literally, Yabershippa?
Something that reminded me of chip, but I know it's not.
Okay, what's the ship at the end? Where else do we see that word? In modern English. Right? It's not used real often, but friendship.
Oh yeah, friendship.
Fellowship. Okay. Kinship. These are pretty much the only 3 I can really think of. Okay. But the Yaber. What's bear?
Beer?
Beer.
So it's like beer party. Basically.
Beer ship. It's a kegger. Yeah. I mean, that's what he's talking about. When it was time at the monastery came, we're thinking monks here, and everybody thinks, oh, monks, you know, they're all dour and straight, you know, like pilgrims. They're not like pilgrims, right? They're English, first of all, so they're going to drink a lot of beer, right? Because most people didn't just naturally drink water. I mean, beer was something that was it still is, very easy to make, and you could have around in large quantities. So when he was at the beer ship, you know, and what does the ship mean? It's this idea of togetherness. So kinship, togetherness with kin, fellowship, togetherness with people like you, friendship, you know, to be in the state of, etc. So this is to be in the state of around others who enjoy beer, etc. Okay? So thus far, what have we been told? So it was his custom to go to the hall, what is called a refectory in a monastery, where the meal was. And what have we been told so far, because we haven't had the whole story yet, so far happens while they're drinking and eating? What gets passed around?
The heart.
The heart. Why?
Because they like music.
Because they like music. Okay? So what's the image we have here? Think of a hall, and I should have done a drawing of this. Think of a hall, long table, probably one table, or possibly 4 tables, you know, set in a square. So you have a table, right? And somebody, you know, pulls out from underneath the table the harp. This isn't the kind of harp that you see, you know, popular culture, angel sitting up on clouds. It looks like a little Greek harp. This is a harp that's probably about 2.5 to 3 feet long, made of wood. Okay, it's got a cut at the top where the strings come down, hollow sounding board, and you know it's kind of strummed, right? You can find images on YouTube. You can find videos on YouTube. Look for I'll post a link to it. Benjamin Bagby, Bagby. Okay, he began. Sheesh, when was this? I want to say late 60s, but I don't think he's that old. Maybe he's in the 70s. He began doing a performance of Beowulf, okay, with a harp, and he does the whole thing, all 3,182 lines, if you have the time. And he does it with an Anglo-Saxon harp, right? And you can find other, you know, sound files of people doing things with harps, but there's one recording. I'm trying to remember who it's by. It might be Jess Bessinger. And I'm not kidding. And this thing was done in the 60s. It sounds like Bob Dylan. So think Bob Dylan doing Old English poetry. Nasally, you know, he's had a few joints and a few beers. It's 60s. I mean, it's really 60s, okay? So the harp starts to come around and pick up with where you were, Sarah, and go on from there.
In Old English or?
No, in translate. So I'm trying to remember where that was.
I ended the house. He went to his house.
Oh, okay. So he gets up and leaves, right? Then he, line 19, very end.
Yeah, okay, he went to his house. Then I think I have, on a certain occasion that he left that house, that keep me right. Anyway, this feast, and out had gone to, I think I meant the cattle shed,
right,
of which the care of him was on that night was assigned.
Okay, stop there for a second. So go back to the who's, the who's thus Gebershipus.
Mm-hmm.
It's the house where the beer ship was. He's talking about the hall. So he left that house and went up to the, how was it put it? The Neata Shippena, the cowshed, essentially, okay?
Okay.
Where he was assigned to rule the night and then pick up with 22.
Just click here on this side. Then he, in due time, his limbs and rest settled and fell asleep. There stood next to him in a dream and hailed and greeted him and called his name. Can you not hear me? Sorry.
Who stood next to him? Caedmon.
Oh, someone.
Yeah, a man.
Sorry.
And
Yeah.
one thing to be careful of. It looks like it should be some, but it's almost always one. So sometimes you'll see the phrase, and we'll see this in Beowulf, sum 15. It doesn't mean some 15. It means one of 15. Okay. All right. So go ahead.
So that saying there stood one man beside him, basically. Okay.
In his vision, in his dream.
Okay. Okay, in his dream. Gotcha. He hailed and greeted him and called his name. Caedmon, sing me something.
Okay.
Then answered he and said, sorry, can we keep going?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Wow, this is wrong. Now, sorry, not know how this is the one that threw me off. I think he's saying, I know not how at all to sing.
Okay.
And I, for this reason.
Yeah, stop right there. Look at those first 5 words in that clause. Not, ne, con, can. But here, it more literally means no. But when we say, I can't, we often mean I don't know how to do something. So not, no, I, not, sing on, infinitive, to sing. That I don't know nothing about singing. That's what he's saying. Okay? So he's commanded, Caedmon, sing me something, anything. And Caedmon replies to the vision in the dream, I don't know how to sing. And, now pick up there.
And I, for this reason, went out from the feast, and here he came, because I could not sing at all. Again he said, he who with him was speaking was, yet you can sing.
Okay. And the word there, machta, that comes from that Old English magen. Okay. You are able to, you know how to, you perceive how to, you have the ability. And Kevin's like, dude, I just told you, I can't. Okay. And then notice Caedmon's reply.
Then said he, what shall I sing? Said he, sing me about the beginning of creation.
Frum shaft. Frum means beginning, foundation, origin, shaft. Shaft is related to shop, making, shaping. Okay? So you say I can sing. What do you want me to sing about? Sing about creation. Tha, he, tha, thas, answara, on things. So.
When he this answer received, then began he at once or immediately, began to sing in praise of God, the Creator, these verses, and those words that he never had heard the meaning of which this is. And then there's the poem.
Yeah, or he heard, he began to sing this verse in these words, Fehe never yehirda, which he had never heard. See, that's the important part about this, one of the important parts about this passage. He'd never heard this song before. The implication is, he might have picked up a few lines from a previous song and could sing those. But this is the first instance of this song, okay? The order essentially is this. That is the order of the words. And we're going to skip Caedmon's hymn for a moment. Or did you finish in Caedmon's hymn?
I think I might have finished in the hymn.
Okay, that's fine. So who picks up after the hymn or starts in the hymn and continues after them? Okay, so pick up after the hymn with the Tha'aros. We'll come back to the hymn. Let's go ahead and we'll try to work all the way through the rest of it, and then we'll come back and spend the remainder all on the hymn.
Okay. Do you want me to do Old English or just translate?
Do a few words, do from the Tha'aros to your Theoda in Old English.
Tha'aros he from them slepe und il thothe he slepende song feste in Yeminde de und them wordum sona mone word in that ilche Yemet gode virthes songes to Yetheode.
Okay. Let's pause. Is that me? It is me. Where is that happening? Let's pick up and go back. So all of those ashes, the A-E scrunched up together, the sound that represents is the A in cat, in sat, and mat. So it's Tha'aros he from tham, not fame, tham slappa on eal, not eel, eal tha he, tha he slappende, som feste in Yemind, the Y in the Yemind. It's not a sound that we have natively in English. It's the sound it's moving towards the sound. You have in the German Ü in like Küche for kitchen, or if you're a Bugs Bunny Warner Brothers cartoon fan, Pepe Le Pew, it's mind. So you have to kind of round your lips, okay? Have de on tham, wardum, sona moni, ward, in fact, ilcha yemet gode, wirthus, the ed there needs to be voiced. It needs to have the th sound because it's between two voiced elements, the R and the E. Wirthus songos to ye theoda, because it's double. Okay, so go ahead and translate that. And just translate to the rest of wherever you're supposed to finish.
Okay. In word for word?
Yeah, start with that.
Okay. Then arose he from that sleep, and all those things which he while sleeping had sung firmly in memory have, and to those words at once many words in that same manner God-worthy songs added. Then came he in mourning to that estate steward. He superior was, told him what gift he received, and he at once to their abbess led, and he then explained and said, then commanded he assemble all the most learned men and the scholars, and to those present commanded said, that dream and that song sang, so that by the judgment of all of them could be decided what it was and whence it had come.
Okay, stop there for a minute and let's go back a little bit. So he came in the morning to the person in charge, to the alderman, told him blah, blah, blah. Because, I mean, there are a couple of words got dropped off. And he hina sona tuter, and he soon took him to the abbess, led him to the abbess, and introduced him, informed her, and told her what? that what had happened. So they called the assembly of all the learned men, the Yaleridistan, okay? The Yaleridest, that's the most learned, but it's plural. It's the most learned men. That is, so you have kind of, levels of learned men at the monastery. You've got people like Caedmon, who lived and worked at the monastery, but he was a coward. He wasn't learned at all. So he was taken to the most well-educated, and the Learneres, the scholars and such, and presented to them, told them the dream, the poem that he sang, find out what their judgment was, and we're going to find out what that means in a moment. What does that mean, what their judgment was? Because it's not like, well, okay, that's a pretty good poem, we'll give it a 10. It's not that kind of judgment. It's, where's the gift from? Okay. Okay, so pick up where you left off, if that's where you're supposed to pick up.
I just finished that
Okay,
line.
you finished that.
Then was he all seen by just as it.
And that's where you stop? Okay.
That's where I stopped.
Now, put that in, rephrase that into modern, better English.
Then he arose from that sleep, and all those things which he had sung while sleeping were firmly in his memory. And to those words, all at once, many words worthy of God in that same manner were added.
Good.
Then he went in the morning to the estate steward, who was his superior, and told him what gift he had received. And he at once led him to the abbess, and he explained it to her. Then she commanded all the most learned men and the scholars to assemble, and ordered those present commanded him to tell of the dream and sing that song, so that by the judgment of all of them it could be decided what Caedmon's gift was.
Okay, stop there for just a moment. What's going on? So notice, even though she's the abbess of the monastery, she rules. She doesn't make the judgment herself. She gets all the wise people there together to form a judgment. And in other words, she essentially calls a council of elders, a council of advisors together. Okay, now go on.
Okay. From whence it had come, then he was seen by all just as it.
Okay.
That's
where he stopped. Okay, so from whence it had come. Why? Why are they concerned about from whence it had come?
Because it supposedly came from God.
Keep going, yes. Towards the end of the New Testament, in one of John's letters, and I can't remember which one, it's one of the short 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, John tells his readers, test the spirits, find out from whence they come. And he says, here's how you find out from whence they come. If they say, if the Spirit says, and by spirits there, he might mean literal, spirits, but he might also mean people who claim to be one of us. Find out what they say, find out what they believe. And the way, he says to do that is, if they say Jesus is the Christ, is the Son of God, that he died and rose from the dead, cool, they're one of us. If they don't, they're not one of us, they're from Satan, blah, 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 blah. Okay? That's the point she's getting at, or that's the point they're getting at. They've got to find out, is this legit, or is this some kind of, demonic temptation to whatever, okay? Who picks up there? Okay? So do a few lines, I don't know, let's go see. So you pick up with that hit wire from Drickner, right? Go from there to just the end of that page in Old English. And then start your translation.
H-A.
Heaven leech.
Heavenly.
Wait, are you in line 48? Are you on? Okay, 48. I'm just making sure.
Heavenly. Ifu.
Yevu.
That's right.
It's yeah, right. It's the ya and the F is between two vowels.
Forgive them.
V for yiv.
So sorry.
It's okay. That's why we go slow and I interrupt a lot.
Sorry. The Raycon and him on Saturday soon.
Holly,
Bell.
Holly spell.
Ali Bell on Gundre,
Godkunde.
Lair,
Lare,
already, Word,
Ward.
Bed, Word,
Yeah, Ward.
Bed, Word, Bedudon, him, the gift,
Yes.
yes. I know in my head to be a silent, and then I say it anyway. He,
Hold on. It's not that it's silent. It has the sound of a Y. So yif, you know, and similarly, a couple of times you've dropped the H at the beginning of a word, like Holly, or at least what I heard was Ali, like almost like ALI, but it's Holly, Holly, okay? So pick up with 50, yif, hey, mate, hey. One of the things that's throwing you is the line over the vowels. You're seeing that, and your eyes are telling you, in modern English, that means that's a long E, which is he. Or if it's a long A, so it's the sound A. But it's got those continental values, so the macron over the E means it's an A sound. And if the macron's over an A, then it's the aw, as in father. So thought, hey, go back to the beginning of that line 50, fa, yif, hey, machta, fat, hey. Now pick up. Good. 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 Havda. Wizon. Good. Toe. Husa. Husa, sorry. Okay. Final E's. Yeah, take a breath. Got through it. Final E's are essentially not a. Pretend you're Canadian, but you don't go all the way. EH, think of. Okay? So when you see eode, and then who's not who's havde, not havde. Okay? So go ahead and go back up to where you started and start translating word for word. I don't remember where that was. 48?
The beginning of 48, yeah.
Okay.
Was that hymns were from the Lord himself, heavenly gift given. Then related they him and told a certain holy story and divine teaching workers.
Okay, let me pause. Let me interrupt you for just a second. Back at the beginning of 49, end of 48, then I think you said related or told, they, him. What would we throw in there in modern English? To. So even though you're doing the literal there, go ahead and throw in, then related they to him, and in that word, the next word, S-G-D-O-N, Caedmon, the G is almost silent. It's the palatalized. And the palatalized is pronounced ya, say, you're not going say ya done, right? Because it's too hard. And that's eventually just going to get dropped off. And what's that become? Said. Then they said done. And go ahead, the holy spell. Okay, so pick up with Bede and continue translating. $49.
So 49
Towards the end.
and divine, oh, sorry.
At the end, Bede him.
Enjoy him.
Okay.
Then if he might, that he in melody song that should turn to. Then he had the matter accepted, then proceeded, and also put went as a
That's fine.
alternative. He home to his house and came again in the morning, and with the best poetry adorned, to them sang and gave back that hymn it was.
Okay, stop there. So, just not the translation, the story. So what happened? What's happened to this point?
So at this point, he has
What did the ministers, the scholars, the learned ones tell him? I don't mean literally, but figuratively. What did they do when everybody was brought together? And then he went home and did something with what he was told. What did they, what was the word? Sorry, turn the page. They told him, 49, the holy word and God kundra lare word. Right? A holy story and teachings of God, essentially. And then they bade him, they ordered him to do what with what he heard? How? What are they really telling him to do? Okay. They told him a Christian story. They give him a story from the Gospels, let's say. Pick one, prodigal son. So there's this guy, he has two sons, and the younger son says, Dad, give me my inheritance. Father says, okay, gives him his inheritance. He goes off, lives in a far country, blows his wad, ends up, living with the swine, wakes up one day and says, this sucks, comes to his senses, goes back home, father's looking for him, sees him coming from afar, runs out, welcomes him back, older son's all jealous, blah, 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 okay? They tell him that. And then what do they tell him to do? Bingo. Turn that, so I've just given you the skeleton of a story, turn that into a song. turn that into a poem. Okay? Remember, the night before this, less than 24 hours earlier, Caedmon leaves the hall. For what reason? Yeah, and when we're told he can't sing, it doesn't mean he's like me and he can't carry a tune. It means he doesn't understand the process. He doesn't understand the principles of alliterative poetry that we're going to talk about. So he drinks the beer, but as the harp comes closer, he skedaddles out of there, right? So this is his what? This is like his prelim examination if you're a doctoral student. You know, you get to the end of your classes, almost the end of your classes, you have to take exams before you start your dissertation. But this is a little bit more serious than that kind of exam, because this is kind of, well, if he can't do it, then what does that tell them? False vision, or he's lying to us. Either way, results are not good. Right? So he takes that story or those stories, and then he comes back, and what are we told that he does? 51 and following.
You want the polished or the literal?
You can give me the literal.
That he had the matter accepted, proceeded. Oh, sorry. He comes to the house, saying, came again in the form, with the best of his warranted, saying, and gave back that him commanded was.
So
Then again, the abbess cherished and delighted in God. So he came back and proved.
he came back, and we're told what? In the best language. I mean, he's now top of the chart, so to speak, compared to the other singers slash shops slash poets. Okay. Do you continue with 54? Or who picks up with 54? Okay. Go ahead and do to the end of your part.
Polished or still in the literal?
Go ahead and give me the polished.
Then again, the abbey cherished and delighted in God's gift and the man, and they urged him to abandon his secular life and proceed with the monastic order, and he readily consented. He was accepted by that monastery with his possessions and joined the community of God's servants, and was taught that secret of sacred history and story.
Okay, stop.
All those things and learned.
Let me pause you for a second. Go back to line 56. You said that he was accepted in that minister, or in that minster. But you left out a word, pretty important word. I mean, it's one of those little small words that Sarah was talking about, you know, she just, because they're hard to find. Und heel hina in dat minster, ontvang, and she, him, she, on, this is again, the syntax is not modern English. She received him in that minster. So this is the abbess, and we didn't read much about Abbess Hill. She was a big deal. She was a very big deal at this time in Anglo-Saxon history. I mean, kings went to her for her blessing. I mean, she was pretty powerful. Okay, she kind of personally says, Caedmon, you're gonna be a monk. And there wasn't really, an offer there. It was kind of like, Caedmon, sing to me. It was, Caedmon, you're gonna be a monk, and you're gonna be a monk in my monastery. And he's like, cool, okay. So pick up with his, she received him, and Hina Yathelda, that's the Yathelda is doing something to him, okay? And he did what with God's stories?
And learned to be as the beast chewing the cud, and that beateth on turn.
Okay, of Middle Earth, yeah, of the shaping of Middle Earth. Okay, so we're told he gets told stories and he converts those stories into poetry. Right? We have a whole series of poems that 100 years ago were called the Caedmonian poems, or the Caedmonian songs. And there's a manuscript that was called, and your introduction mentioned this, that's the Junius manuscript, I believe, called the Caedmon manuscript, because it has a poem about creation. It's got a poem about, essentially a poetic translation of Genesis and Exodus, and it's got poems about Christ, and it's got poems about, it's full of poems that are biblical paraphrases, essentially. And, from the time of the beginning of Anglo-Saxon studies in the very late 16th century, really 17th, early 18th century, up through the early part of the 20th century, this manuscript was thought, this is Caedmon's, these are all Caedmon work. Nobody today, virtually, I'm sure there's somebody somewhere, virtually nobody today believes Caedmon wrote any of those hymns or poems, for the simple reason none of them stylistically are similar to this little short 9-line poem. Right? And that's another reason why a lot of scholars, I would say the majority of scholars, don't think Caedmon was a real person. That whoever created this poem, be attributed to that story, etc. Okay, who's next? Okay, Harlow, go ahead and see. That was, I think that was around 62. So pick up with 63, the Yardis Yeshapa, and just read in Old English 3 or 4 lines.
All right. La Ray, the last 8 is Muthe, Moreton, and
Learnodon. Sorry, it's taking me a while because I was looking at the wrong line. Yeah.
How do you pronounce it again?
Let me go back and start you at the beginning. La Rewas, okay? La Rewas at his Mutha Reaton on Learnodon. That's another one of those hard, again, getting those sounds in our modern English mouths is difficult. Okay, pick up with song.
Song, E,
Hey.
Arrest, B, Midan, Ye, Redes,
Yeah, artist.
Yuskipe,
Yeshepe. SC is always going to be the sh sound.
Pond, B, Fruman, Monsonet,
Moncunis.
Martinez, Pond, Yell, That, Stare,
Good.
Genesis,
Good.
Date, is, Sale, Oreste, Moises, Zip,
Bullock.
Bulk,
Because it's doubled. Bulk, you pronounce both O's. Bullock. It's not 2 syllables, but it's bulk. Okay?
Pond F, B, Bukonge,
Mm-hmm.
Israeli, Folks,
Focus.
Focus,
Focus.
and Egypta, Long day.
Yeah, that's good. That's enough. Okay.
Okay.
And so go ahead and do your translation.
Okay, so we're going from like 63.
Yeah.
So it's like Earth's creation and according to the beginning mankind. And all those let's see, stories of Genesis that be the first book of Moses, and by Exodus of Israeli people out of Egypt, and by entry the Promised Land, and by other many stories of the books of the canon of the Holy Scripture, and by Christ's incarnation, and by his passion, and by his ascension in heaven, and by the Holy Spirit's coming, and those learned apostles.
Okay, stop there for just a minute. The word "bi," is it by?
Or according to?
According to, it's about.
Okay.
So, in about the Exodus and about Christ's death, resurrection, uprising, the whole nine thing. Okay, so go ahead.
Okay. And again about the days of future judgment, and about terror of infernal torment, and about the sweet heavenly kingdom. He many songs wrote, and likewise many about the divine blessings and glory he wrote, and all those he earnestly took care that those men might draw from love of sin and wrongdoings, and to love and to yearn for good deeds.
Yeah. So yeah, what's he saying about turning away from sin and evil deeds to? I kind of like the awaken. I can't read my handwriting. I think I have something like to excite to good deeds. But yeah, I kind of like that. Okay. Is that where you stopped? Or do you have more?
Yeah, I think that. No, I think I had it to like line 74.
Okay, go ahead.
Therefore, he was the man very pious and humbly subject to the regular disciplines, and against those who in otherwise take wish. That's roughly where.
Okay. Who's next? Who is next? Anybody? Okay. Don't worry about the old English because we're running out of time. Because we still have to talk about Caedmon 7. Just do your translation. And what line did you go to?
I think I was supposed to do 80 to 95.
Okay,
But I can start at 75.
Yeah, just go ahead and pick up with 80.
Okay. You want the polished or the literal?
Do the literal.
Was there in the vicinity infirm men house into which the custom was that the infirm and near or bring in should, and then they are together ministered to.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Then asked he his attendant in evening that night, he of the world to go, was that he in that house him a place should prepare that he rest might.
Okay, so what's he talking about?
He's asked for a place to rest at the infirm house.
In the infirmary. What's he getting ready for?
Death.
Yeah. Preparing to die. Okay. Go ahead.
Wondered he, nobleman, for why he for that asked, because to him seemed that his passing so near
Not was, yeah. So they're surprised because they think you got plenty of time left.
Did, however, or yet, whatever he said.
Yeah, swa is almost something like just as or so as, etc. So just as he said.
Just as he said and commanded.
Okay.
And when he there to rest went, and he with rejoicing heart was speaking. Yeah, I wrote I didn't write the word for word on this one. With him speaking, basically was speaking about certain things, and they were joking.
Well, and with those who are, you know, mid him spreken de uitkeren aan Gleo and was they after Waran, you get glossed on at the bottom of the page. Speaking with those who are already in there, okay. Then it was after what?
So past midnight,
Right.
he asked whether they had any Eucharist inside. And they answered and said, what need for you, Eucharist? Not God passing so near, is since you cheerfully and joyfully to us speak are. Said he again, bring to me the Eucharist. When it in hand had asked he whether they all had a peaceful and cheerful spirit.
To him. Yeah, so he's taking the Eucharist and he's asking them, are we all cool? Or do you have any problems with me? He's asking essentially for forgiveness. Okay? Remember, they said, what do you need the Eucharist for? You got plenty of time left. They're thinking you're not going to die. He's thinking last rites, essentially. He's literally getting ready to die. Okay, so pick up with 94 or 93, I think it is. Then,
they all and said that they no rancor to him felt, but they all very kindly disposed were, and they in turn him asked that he and all happy were.
Yeah, so he asked them, do you have anything against me, or do you have any problems with me, any sins I've committed against you? They say, no, we are all blithe. What modern English word do we get from blithe? Blithe. Are you blithe? Are you happy in spirit? And they say, we are happy in spirit to you. And then they ask him, do you have anything against us? And he says, no. It's the exact same thing, if you're familiar with it, we see at the very end of Hamlet. Hamlet and Laertes express forgiveness to each other. Hamlet says to Laertes, may my death not be on you. And Laertes says, may my death and my father's not be on you. So they both die free of sin. And they both, pray for forgiveness for each other. Okay? So that's exactly what we see Caedmon doing with the brothers at the monastery here. Right? Pick up, do you still have more? Or are you done there?
95 was the end of mine.
Okay.
I guess I'll finish that line. Andrew said, my brothers, my beloved.
Okay. Who picked up there? Or is everybody gone?
Everybody's gone. I think Bethany should have picked up there.
Yeah, okay. Okay, we'll stop with that then and go back to Caedmon's hymn. Hold on, I gotta move this book out of the way. So, Caedmon's hymn. Nu schulen, let me try and read it. Nu schulen herion haven reaches werd, met todes wakka anders modjethak. Werk wulderfeder, swahe wundre johlas, eetje drichten, or anstelda. He erst shelp erden berden, javen to hrova, highly shippen. Tha middenjard, man kinnes werd, eetje drichten, after telda, firm foldan, freya almichtig. Okay, look at the bottom of page 80. Sorry, it's not page 80.
116, maybe.
Yeah, it's there it is. Bottom of 116 in yours, where you have the Northumbrian version. Okay. The version in Bede, remember, when Bede transcribed the hymn, he transcribed it in what? In Latin. So when Bede first wrote the ecclesiastical history, he put Caedmon's hymn in Latin. So he translated it from Old English to Latin. And then very soon, after Bede writes the ecclesiastical history in 731, very soon your note on the bottom of page 116 mentions it gets translated within 6 years. 737, it gets translated back into Old English. There are about 20 copies of Caedmon's hymn in Old English. Oddly enough, one of them is at the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, Russia. There's an Anglo-Saxon manuscript there, and it's written like on the margin of the page in the bottom, right? So you have the Northumbrian version down below. Nu schulen hergan haven reachas wired, mehr to das machtig anders modjedank. Werk wildervaarder, Swahe wundrige was, echi drichten, or a stelede. He erist shop, aldebarnum, hebben til hrova, haleg scheppen, tha middenjard, mon kinnes ward, echi drichten, after tiadai, fjernfoldu, freya almechtig. And you got some significant variant phrases there, okay? So, let's translate. Now, we're already done essentially the first 4 lines, but now we ought to praise of the heavenly kingdom, because it's genitive, the guardian, the warden, the protector, etc. Okay, of God's might, the might of God, that's meteras, genitive singular, the might of God, and his modjethak. And you get that, purpose of mind. Okay, what the hell does purpose of mind mean? If you have a purpose in your mind, what's another way of putting that? Intentions, forethought, planning, all those kinds of things, right? The work of the glory Father, very, very Germanic, kind of word there. Is he of every or each of wonders, the Hawas is genitive, singular, of each, wundra, genitive, plural, of wonders, of each of wonders, the Echedrichted, eternal Lord, or the beginning, established, began, set into place, okay? Line 35. He first shaped. Erden Bernum. You got a gloss down there. For the children of the earth. Bernum, think of a Scottish, modern Scottish. If you've ever known or met any Scots or listened to Scots, talk about the wheel of bairns. Children, right? So the children of earth, look at the Northumbrian version, Alda Barnum, Barnum. And you got a gloss down there for the children of men. Children of earth, children of men. Well, the children of earth, that is us. Children of men, it's a little bit more, specific. That could be an indication of what in textual editing is an example of what's called lectio difficilio. So if you've got two texts, let's say, and one of them is a more difficult reading. That's what lectio difficilio means, more difficult reading. One of them is a more difficult reading, and one of them is an easier reading. Hamlet's first soliloquy in the play begins, "Oh, that this tutu something flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew." The word that comes before flesh is either solid, S-O-L-I-D, or sullied, S-U-L-L-I-E-D, right? The first folio, first collected edition of Shakespeare's works, prints solid, right? Because he's talked about flesh melting, thawing, resolving. So if something that is solid is being essentially kind of like desiccated, or not desiccated, but it's being, melted down and purified. Cool, that's understandable, right? But think of the other word, sullied. What does sullied mean? If your reputation is sullied, what has happened to it? It's ruined, it's dirty, right? So, principle of lectio difficilio, because this reading shows up in earlier editions of Hamlet than the first folio, in quarto editions, editors have got to decide, which one am I going to use? Well, the principle of lectio difficilio essentially states the more difficult reading is more likely to be the author's intentional reading. Because the author is more than likely going to have the more difficult ideas. But somebody who is copying might see that and go, well, I don't understand that. And if you don't understand it, what do? You make it more understandable, right? And so you take sullied. He meant solid because it has S, it's got a vowel, it's got U, and it's got a D. It must mean solid, right? So that this tutu sullied flesh would thaw, melt, and resolve itself into a dew. See, that second line isn't just talking about taking something solid and kind of, extracting something from it. It's taking something impure and purifying it. When you resolve something into a dew, you remove all the impurities. Take water from a tap, boil it, put a coil, and what kind of water do you get out of it? You get distilled, pure water, no minerals, etc. So, Aldebarnum, children of earth, children of men, Erthan Barnum, children of earth. Which of those, and I can tell you which one I think, which of those is the more difficult reading? Well, children of men makes a lot of sense. Children of earth, that's a little more difficult. Because that kind of, you could go all weird and Tolkienian and say, well, that's like talking about dwarves. And no, he's not, but, okay, so it's a little more difficult. So he first shaped, but it's Barnum. It's dative plural for the children of earth. What? Heaven as a roof. Rova. Heaven as a roof, And then you get Halley Shippen. Why? Why is Halley Shippen there? Because Halley Shippen is going back and restating, hey, the subject. This is an example of what's called variation, where you get something named and then it gets named multiple different ways. Hey, Halley Shippen, Eitjedrichten, Freya Almichte. Freya Almichte, Eitjedrichten, Halley Shippen, Man Kennis Ward are all restating hey. They're restating it, but they're doing what? They're giving it slightly different, emphasis. So it's a variation on a theme, so to speak. So he made first 4 children of earth, heaven as a roof. Look at the biblical account in Genesis. You get light, and then the waters above are separated from the waters beneath. That's the firmament is being created, right? Then Midnyard, middle earth, that's literally what that means. It's the earth that is in the middle, okay? Mon Kennis Ward, the Ward, warden, protector, guardian of mankind. And we're going to see almost that it's not the same phrase, it's the same idea in Beowulf, a poem that many take to be, it's entirely pagan. We'll see. Eitjedrichten, eternal Lord. And notice that half line is entirely repeated from line 4. It's the exact same line. He did what? After he made the earth, after he made the heavens, and after he made middle earth, he made what? Firum Foldon, the earth for men. Freya Almichte. And I don't remember, how does he gloss Freya? Where is that? Line 39? 39. Lord, the Almighty Lord. Freya, it's also a pagan name. Just added either a J or a Y to it, and it becomes Freya. Okay, one of the goddesses of it. It's also related, can be related, depending upon its spelling, to the word for friend. So the Almighty Friend. Okay, so why did Caedmon leave the hall? He told them, he tells us, he doesn't know how to sing. Can't keep a note. He doesn't know how to do this. The person he sees tells him, yes, you can sing. Notice Caedmon's reply. Okay, Lord, what do you want me to sing? Sing to me of creation. And boom, this pops out. Right? He doesn't say sing to me about God. Because a lot of students, when I teach my Britlit 1 course, beginnings to, it's supposed to be to Milton, I never get that far. Milton to 1640s. And I do this poem, and I'll ask them, what's this poem about? Almost unanimously, they say, oh, it's about God. It's not about God. It's about creation. Well, God's the one responsible for creation, but it's about creation. Okay? Let me, so why couldn't he do this before? Well, let's look at, where is it? Let's look at this. This is why he couldn't do it before. This over here. So these are the so-called rules of creation, let's say. Creation. Rules of, let's see if I can get that to show me everything. rules of alliteration. And notice what I put at the top of this, and I'll post this or I'll email this to you. They're not rules like somebody actually wrote them down. There are some of those written by an Old Norse writer in the 14th century. Snorri Sturluson wrote some of these rules down. These are rules that are essentially deduced from an analysis, and they were deduced in the late 18th, 19th century by scholars of Germanic languages, philologists of the Germanic languages, by reading the poems and saying, hey, look, this one, or this follows this pattern, and this follows this pattern, and gradually came to realize all Germanic poetry follows a very, very specific pattern, right? So, again, as with every rules, there are rule breakers. There are exceptions to the rules. So, these rules generally follow, or they seem to hold true, from the period roughly 500 AD to 1400 AD or so. We see them in the earliest surviving Germanic poetry, and you just read it. Caedmon's hymn is the earliest surviving Germanic poem. Germanic in the sense that English is a Germanic language, okay? All the way up through the Nibelungenlied, which is written sometime probably around 1204, probably up through, I think I put around 1400, okay? And Marsden mentions an exemption or an exception to some of these rules on page 32. So here are the basic rules. And I'm going to start with the second clause. Every line of Germanic poetry has 4 stressed syllables, right? Another way of looking at that is each half line has 2 stressed syllables. So the first half line, 2 syllables have got to be stressed, pronounced louder, accentuated, right? And then second half line, 2 syllables have got to be stressed. That's why when I did the poem, Nu schulen Herion Haven reaches where, okay? There's debate as to which of those first 2 syllables is stressed. Is it nu or is it the sh in shula? But definitely the h in Herion is, okay? Why? Because of the h in heaven reaches. So nu schulen Herion heaven reaches where. Where is the final accented syllable, okay? So the first stressed syllable in the second half line, what's called the B line, right? That's the syllable that determines the alliteration. Makes, in my semi-rational mind, makes absolutely no sense. You would think composing this, the very first accented syllable is going to be the one that determines the alliteration. That is not the case. That first stressed syllable in the second half line is called the head stave. This language is what comes from Snorri Sturluson, the Hafstava, okay? Because this applies emphatically in Old Norse poetry, okay? So what that means is when you're looking for the alliteration and for how a line scans, you got to look at the second half line first, right? So it determines the alliteration for the entire line. That first stressed syllable of the second half line must alliterate with at least 1 stressed syllable in the first half line. Usually it alliterates with both of them, but not always, right? Only the first 3 stressed syllables, so the 2 in the first half line, the first one in the second half line, may alliterate. The 4th one never alliterates. And I know, I put almost, but it never alliterates. If it does alliterate it's merely accidental. Because there are some poems where it does alliterate, but it's clear. It's you're not intended to, essentially, okay? Any vowel alliterates with any vowel. So notice that right there, you've got to throw the modern understanding of alliteration out the door. Because modern alliteration, vowels don't alliterate, right? Alliteration is words that begin with the same consonant sound in modern, literary technique. You wouldn't say apple in modern English alliterates with orange. You do in Old English. In fact, apple can alliterate with act, okay? Or apple can, the ah in apple can alliterate with any diphthong. So vowels and diphthongs alliterate, right? Generally, words that will carry stress, pretty much in this order, are nouns, verbs, pronouns, adjectives, and adverbs. So why? Because those are the words that carry all the meaning. Conjunctions really don't carry much meaning. Articles really don't carry much meaning. Prepositions really don't carry much meaning. That is, you can read something, you can read almost anything without articles, conjunctions, and prepositions, and figure it out pretty easily. You can't read anything that doesn't have nouns, verbs, adjectives, because then you're doing what? You have no subjects, you have no verbs, you have no objects. Okay? So now, look at this again and go back to Caedmon's hymn. Well, it's just, hold on, I've got to move that. Move. Stop the screen sharing of that. And then we go back to this. Yeah. Just look at the first few lines of Caedmon's hymn. So just looking at the first line, you can see the alliteration right there in the H's. So it's that and that alliterate, that pretty much indicates the ha in heaven has got to be the headstave, right? So this is a perfect example of where you have the alliteration determined by the second half line, but it only alliterates with one sound, with one stressed syllable in the first half line. So then you have to determine, okay, where are the two stressed syllables here? Well, that's definitely one of them. And then the fourth stressed syllable, right? So heaven reaches has secondary stress, right? Where? It's the what and where. But over here, as I said before, you can look at various, scannings of this poem online. You can search for it. And you'll see some that stress nu. So you get nu shulen herion, heaven reaches where. Others will have nu shulen herion, heaven reaches where. I think it's the new, now, right? Just like at the beginning of Beowulf, Beowulf begins with what. All the what means is, it's like, imagine this bottle was a piece of crystal and I got a piece of silverware and did that. All what is doing there is it's serving as an attention getter, okay? The new, if you really accentuate it, it kind of gets the audience's attention. Look at the second line. So you look at the second half line to find the headstave. Well, on is a conjunction, not gonna carry the stress. His personal pronoun, possessive pronoun, it can, right? It's kind of low down on the list, Ah, but there's a good noun. And look at that, m. So that's definitely the alliterating sound. So that tells us methodes. So if we were to scan this, you'd put either a line or an X. Usually you put a diagonal slash line. Method has secondary stress, methodes. S has no stress. You put an X above that. Methodes, mata. So over here, you'd have the line and then an X over the E. On, X, not stress. His, X, no stress. Mode, put a slash line over that. Ya is never going to be stressed. It's not going to have a secondary stress. It's just, in terms of scansion, filler. It's an empty syllable. Right? Mode, you thunk. The th there is stress. Method is maka on his mode, you thunk. Right? Work wilder fader. But the fa, the or is unstressed. The fa has a secondary stress. So the main stress looks like, a slash line. Secondary stress is a slash line the other direction. Like not a grave accent, it's the other one. Can't remember what it's called. Schwa, conjunction, you don't worry about it. Personal pronoun, yeah, but we already see the alliteration here. Where wundervader swahi wundra ya hwas. It's on the ha, okay? Not on the what. Here's one. Notice you've got vowel. It's a noun. It's not a preposition or anything. It's a noun, but starts with a vowel. You got a vowel. What? But we have a vowel over here. Echtgedrichten or unstelde. Remember we talked about, whatever it was, last week, 2 weeks ago, a little bit about pronunciation, or not 2 or 3 weeks ago. Talked about Germanic languages, and they have first syllable stress, okay? Except when you have prefixes like this, on, a, ya, an, for, you don't emphasize those. You emphasize the main stem, the main root of the word. So, echtgedichten or unstelde. Back to the book. So, hey, erst shop than Bernum. The line 35. So you start with the second half line to figure out where the alliteration is and where the stress is. Well, it begins with a noun. Nouns are the #1 choice of words to carry stress. So, and it seems to be a pretty important noun because it's children of earth. So the stress is on that first vowel in Ergon. It's on the diphthong, el. Well, is there another word then in the first half line that begins with a vowel? Yes, there is. Arist. So we know that at least alliterates. So is it, hey, Arist shut, than Bernum? Or is it, hey, Arist shut, than Bernum? See, the difficulty then is figuring out, is it hey or is it shut? Right? Bernum is the book in Bernum is the final stress, so that's clear. But again, that's another one where you only have two alliterating, stress syllables. Right? I would probably put hey as a stress syllable. Hey, erst shut, than Bernum. Okay, and then you get the next line, pretty easy to see. You can just look at that. Well, that's fine. Kelvin Kohrova highly shipping. Next one, pretty clear it's on the M's. Thaw is nothing. Midden yard. So mid Done. The done has no stress. So the second stress syllable in that line, yeah. Midyard. Monkinus wired. Mon, stress. Kin, secondary stress. S, no stress. The midyard. Monkinus wired. H, dichten. Efter. Tilde. Now notice that this is, one of the violations of the rules. It's not really, because after is an adverb. It's down there. It's like the lowest of the words that usually would receive stress, right? But it's on the a. A, notice alliterates with a. Dichten, after, tilde. Theorem, voldaan, frail. Is it al, michtig, or al michtig? Well, al there isn't the prefix. It's part of the root word, right? Al michtig. Any questions? I mean, I know this is quick, etc. It's going to get more difficult. I mean, Caedmon's hymn is fairly straightforward because most of the alliteration is easy to see. When we get to later poems, it won't always be easy to see. And I said you've got 4 stressed syllables per line, 2 in each half line. Later on, we're going to see a poem, Dream of the Rood. Seems like another one that we're doing, that has what are called hypermetric lines. In the middle of the Dream of the Rood, the poet, for some reason, no idea why, essentially doubles the length of the line. So you end up with like 8 stressed syllables. Better make sure I'm right about that. Dream of the Rood, what is that? Dream of the Rood, page 228. Yeah, on page, is this right book? 234 in your book. You've got beginning, well, you've got a whole bunch of lines there. I mean, actually beginning on 233, you start seeing these hypermetric lines. I mean, where you have 6 to 7 words in each half line. In most Old English poetry, you've got 4 or 5 words in a half line. Sometimes only 2 or 3, because sometimes, each word will be 2 syllables in both of those. Or sometimes you'll have a line with 2 words, and the first syllable in each of them is stressed and such. But you see, if you look at page 234, line 59. Sarah ich was mit Sorgen gedreven, Panag ich wadere thumb sejum twahanda. I mean, that's a pretty long line, and several other lines on that page. I was wrong. I misspoke when I said, you get 8 stresses. You still tend to have 4. There might be some with some lines with a 1 or 2 extra stresses. Okay. Any question about anything we've done? I know we didn't translate since Bethany wasn't here. The rest of it, but you got. I did want to point out. Caedmon. Where is? Towards the end of Caedmon, where he tells us hold on. Let's see if I can find it. I'm trying to find the spot where Caedmon, where Bede says, it's not in this edition. Why is it not in that edition? It's the spot where Bede talks about, or am I just not seeing it? Where Bede talks about what he's provided is not the poem itself, but is a gist of it. Because he says that you can't, he says you, because you can't literally translate an idea from one language to another. All you can do is get the gist of it. And I'm not seeing that in this. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Was that in your passage? Sorry, okay, you're saying no. So it's not me. And I don't know why. Because if you get a copy, if you pick up, for example, a translation of Bede, like this one, this is the translation by Leo Shirley Price. This is like late 19th century. They give after, and it used to be in one of the textbooks I used for this class. I've been using Marsden for, trying to remember when this came out. This came out in 2004, so I've been using it since about 2005. So it's been a long time. But I talk about this every time. Bede has a comment that gets translated into English as, after he gives Caedmon's hymn, he says, this is the general sense, but not the actual words that Caedmon sang in his dream. For verses, however masterly, cannot be translated literally from one language into another without losing much of their beauty and dignity. And I don't, for the life of me, understand why that's not in here. It must be because of the particular copy of Bede that Marsden is using, that it doesn't actually have that language. Because I've used a version of it that does have that trend, that does have that language. Verses, notice, however masterly, cannot be translated literally from one language into another without losing much of their beauty and dignity. Now, if you remember, Alfred kind of touched on that idea last week in the preface to the Pastoral Care. And that's probably one of the reasons why very early after Bede's ecclesiastical history was written, Caedmon's hymn gets translated. Let me rephrase that. That's probably why we have 20 plus copies, or 20 copies of Caedmon's hymn in Old English, right? because it's not clear. I don't think I might be misspeaking here. I'll check, and if I am, I'll correct it. It's not clear that all of those copies are based upon the translation back into Old English from Bede. It could be the case that, especially the ones in the Northumbrian dialect, that one of those, because Caedmon was from Northumbria, from Whitby, which is near Northumbria, it could be that one of those is based upon an actual Old English version of the poem that had been written down. Why would I suggest that? What did Caedmon do? Again, according to the story, what did Caedmon do once he was told a biblical story by a priest? What did he do with that story? Turned it into poetry, right? And they wrote it down. That's why it was thought that the Junius manuscript was based upon Caedmon's poems, that somebody sat at Caedmon's feet, essentially, or he went into a scriptorium and orally said these poems while all these monks sat there and made multiple copies of it. Well, because we're told that he did this, I think it's safe to assume, if you assume for the moment Caedmon's a real person, that when he orally delivered this poem, somebody copied it, and they copied it in the language that they heard at the time. That is, they copied it in Old English. And because of where Caedmon lived, that Northumbrian dialect would probably be the one closest to Caedmon. And we have multiple copies in the Northumbrian dialect, right? It just, I've not taught this class for 5 years. So it's just kind of like hitting me that the passage wasn't in there, because I like to emphasize. Okay, any other questions / comments about Bede, Caedmon, Sam, and such? Okay, next week, we've got the Sermo Lupi. It means Sermon of the Wolf to the English. Okay? The Wolf, Archbishop Wulfstan, he writes this around 1014 or so. He's a very important archbishop, not only for writer of laws, writer of homilies, advisor to the king, advisor to the Danish king when he became king, the Canute and such. So that is selection 25. So it's getting up there a little bit in your book. And if you remember, the farther along you go in your book, the more difficult the material gets. Okay? So we're doing this, and then we go to Kenilworth and Kinhard, which is number 29. There's only 40 themes total. So we're getting, and then we'll back up, because some of the poetry gets a little bit easier. So what I'm trying to do is to figure out lines for, and this is substantially longer, okay? It's 167 lines. Do it all. I'm going to cut back, however, on the parsing. Let's see. Let's do, there's so much good stuff, because this is fire and brimstone. I mean, he's just blasting everybody. Now we'll just do the first 2 lines, not the Latin, Old English. Leaven men, Yekanawith, Thap Soth is. Dear men, you know what truth is. So he's going to lay it on the line, okay? This world is in haste, and it rushes to its end. That's it. I mean, everything goes downhill from there. We're hell in a handbasket, okay? So from Leaven men to on to Swa at the end of line 2. Just do those 2 lines. Okay? Trying to ease back a little bit so you can spend more time on the translation. I know that's only 2 lines fewer. And unless you've already picked out an article, if you could try and find an article about Wolfstein or specifically about this homily, that'd be good. Or about the Viking invasions about the time of the homily. That would be good too. Or about, the problems that he is deprecating in the homily. That would be good. All right. That's all I've got. If you have anything, speak up. Send me an email. Remember, when you post parsings or you post articles, send them via D2L. So if you're going to send something to me to email, send it to the D2L email. If it's for me privately, everything else just post to the chat list or discussion list.
Should we put our translations for this week in the discussion?
You can. I mean, I'm marking off, your translations just in my grade. All I'm doing at this point is a check mark showing that you've done it for those of you who've done, because not everybody has. In the past, the way I've graded translations has entirely been in class. I'd have it, somebody go, and it's my seeing how much I need to stop somebody, things like that. And all of you, so far, I will say, your translations, whether rough word by word, which should be rough, okay? I mean, they should be very rough, but the words should be correct. And all of you so far are doing very well on that. Getting the polished one, a little more work, but I'm not grading on, are you a Seamus Haney and in the raw, so to speak. So when you do post those, I look through them. I'm not going through and marking things and sending them back, because I hate grading stuff online and having to open and save in PDF and all that kind of nonsense. But yeah, if you want to, go ahead. I guess is the short version. Other questions or comments? All right, that's all. See you next week. If you do have questions, just send them. All righty, bye.